Hi, everyone. So, thought-provoking questions to get you thinking. And this is going to be a podcast that does get you thinking. Have you ever wondered why, no matter how much you try, you still feel stuck in the same emotional loops? Sadness, anxiety, burnout, like personal Groundhog Day. And what if feeling better, blissful, or even energized wasn't a fantasy, but something you could learn to access more often and even maintain? And what if your pain, your hardest moments, held clues to your purpose, your power, and your path forward? So, what you'll get from this? So in this episode, I'm going to talk about the journey and the journey that takes us through the science of how we think, how we shift, how we think about our pain and turn that into possibility, and how we move from stuck survival-based thinking into a more vibrant, joyful way of living. So, you'll learn what I've discovered in 25 years as a therapist, a yoga meditation teacher, coach, service deliverer, which means I have assessed and analysed thousands of referrals and cases that came into our service. And most importantly, what I've learned in my own life and about what really helps us heal. So if you're familiar with my work, you'll know that I've had an interest in psychology and spirituality. Both are important facets to me. Well, not facets, they are me for the last 25, 30 years or even more. And so I've looked at the research evidence base. When I worked in university, a lot of it was about evidence-based research, holistic research, and a lot of the research that's coming out now about the things that we knew that worked, that I utilised, that now we know actually do make a difference. So it's not just about how do we survive, but how do we truly thrive? So in local authorities and NHS, we used to talk about survivals where, you're trying to just do everything every day, to go to work, to get some money in, to hustle, to get around, to take the kids to school. And it's just that perpetual sort of process of making sure you're on top of things. And thriving is about when you're at optimizing everything that you've got, your skills, your gifts, you're happy, there's more flow. Doesn't mean to say that life hasn't got any challenges, but you might flow through it and deal with those challenges more different. So just as a basic thing, whenever I managed the referrals that came into our services in the NHS and in the local authority, we looked at two components: risk, what is the risk around your mental health and well-being, and what is the resilience? And you have to look at two. Lots of people have got a lot of resilience, which is why they cope with adversity and difficult times in their life. So as we're human beings, we're going to have situations that we have to face and go through, whether it's around our children, our relationships, issues at work, narcissistic bosses, all that kind of thing. So whether you're at a crossroads in your job or feeling like the relationship's draining your spirit or just caught in a cycle of emotional fatigue, and boy, have I been there 3 times at least, like seriously been there, there is another way. You'll hear the insights that I've gathered from psychology, um, neuropsychiatry, trauma research, spiritual philosophy, and behavioral change science. And like I said, personal experience. And I often support clients. There's aspects of psychotherapy where it's about listening, but the coaching aspects is where you actually support them to create some tools to help clients either accept more of where they are. Doesn't mean that you don't have to accept what you don't like, and what's in your control. But it's about really having the tools that help you on all sorts of level. And so it's using a multimodal approach. And I think that approach, more and more psychiatrists are realizing that in the field, that we need to look at mental health, well-being, spiritual health, emotional health, all through different lenses of what works in these different parts of the system. So, as I said, I've got over 25 years in the field. Started out, trained as a therapist, worked with adults, then by chance worked in schools with young people. Then I was designing career programs to help kids remain in school, and lots of kids had emotional behavioral issues, and there were lots of issues and patterns within the family. But basically, I've always been curious about the human spirit, really, and why people fall into depression, anxiety, burnout, and the patterns that I saw when I was growing up, I remember really thinking about this from when I was about 8 years old. And I was one of those kids that my mum was sick a lot and had depression, had severe migraines, had a lot of stomach problems. So she was in and out of hospital a few times. And so I was the sort of kid that worried about my mom and um, really didn't know what to do to help her because as a kid you can't. And so I was always curious about what were the kind of things that, if I look back now, would have made it easier for me as a kid and easier for my mom and everything she was dealing with. And of course, things have changed a lot since then, but there are still problems in the system. And we have to be able to take a level of autonomy and control over our lives and start learning what feels right and doesn't feel right for us. The moment I start talking, my throat. As a Taurian, we always have some kind of throat issue at some point. So, how do we move from those survival states into a sense of confidence and ease? I could do a whole workshop just on that one facet. Because if we look at ourselves on a continuum, we've got survival here and we've got thriving here and we have flourishing around. I think we're thriving here and then flourishing. In the survival state is when often we're in a constant state of stress and periods of peace, relaxation, joy. But mostly, if you've got children, you work 40, 50 hours a week, you've got responsibilities trying to pay a mortgage, then stress is going to be a facet of modern life more likely. So it's kind of what's going on there. And to move us over into a state of thriving and flourishing, there are mindsets, belief system, value systems, ideals, what the deeper questions about life that all flow in and out of that. And the way to sort of really start thinking about survival states, the more you can get confident at managing your stress, bringing down your stress levels through some of the basic tools, and they're all online, breath work, putting something in every day to calm the body, calm the nervous system, especially if you've experienced any past trauma, that will constantly get activated in different environments. And then tapping into the things that actually where you have got some confidence, whether you have experienced some joy. So that would be, like I said, a whole sort of separate workshop. But the question I had, like I said, it wasn't professional, it was actually personal. And when I started doing my training, I started learning a lot of the theories that helped me understand some of the challenges and difficulties I had growing up. And I had my own experiences of pain, disconnection, and uncertainty. And like many of my clients, I spent years trying to feel better, trying to live with more vitality, peace, and meaning. And when you've experienced burnout, or like a lot of people have got, where it goes into a serious tipping point, there's something called the HPA axis, where basically the mechanisms in your body have started to get fried. Then it doesn't take much to push you over the edge, even when you start to recover. So you can end up in these sorts of cycles. So that's why I'm really a proponent of creating a plan, even if it's no matter how basic it is, having a framework for your life so that you can measure and monitor how well you're doing in comparison to yourself last week, not other people's measures. And then how you audit your own life so you can start to see what's working, what's helping you feel happier and have more vitality, and what isn't. And then you can start to make choices based on that. So, I think overall, if you grow up in a family where there's a lot of chaos, if there's domestic abuse, if there's chaos, if there's arguments, if there's fighting, or there's just a general sense of disconnection within the family, then you don't necessarily learn the tools that would help you when you start to face some of these challenges. And that's the difficulty for a lot of people, is they don't really know where to go. And so we rely on the systems to help us. And talking about it is important, and it is one aspect. But I realized that even though I wanted to feel better, was trying to feel better, live a life that felt better, and have more peace and meaning, I realized it wasn't also about forcing positivity or trying to fix myself. Because actually, if you look at it through sort of spiritual lens, is we're already whole and we're already okay. what's making us not okay is all the conditions that we came with, that we grow up with from being a kid, about who we think we should be, the job we should do, the partner we should have, the way we should operate in our lives, where we should live. All of these shoulds, oughts, that influence our thinking, and then these internal um, conversations we have about all of that and how we view ourselves and whether or not we see our gifts and value our gifts and even capitalize on those. So it isn't about fixing it. So my 30-day programs aren't about let's make you a better, happier person. But if you're bored, stuck, and unhappy, sometimes we do wait until we're so fed up of being there and we go, right, okay, something's got to change and it's not coming from outside. So where's that going to happen? That we then start to do something. We either go to the gym, we go running, we go um we go and join a group, we do something because at some point the system says move, and we need to move. Movement's important. So as a facet of this, of all the people that came for all the services, I started working with people in 1997. And the problems haven't changed that much, but the context and what we have access to and the information we've got now has massively changed. And when I started working in schools, it was really about kids just weren't informed, really, of the tools that they could use to understand the brain, bring down their stress levels, understand why breathing is really powerful, how to create and maintain friendships, and build rapport and focus on studies and learn different ways of learning. All of those different things are tools that they haven't got access to. We're still not teaching young people some of the basics that can help them so that they don't get to 13, 14, 15 and think that life's all about their identity and who they look, because often there's other things going on under the surface well before they get to 14. But 14, 15, 16 are pivotal times in our mental health and what happens to us in adulthood. So regardless of whether you're a teenager or an adult listening to this, it all applies. So I've brought different components from all these different facets and found that every time I come into contact with a client, we use the same assessment tools. What's working, what isn't working, how long have you been feeling like this? What facets of your life do you feel like it's okay? Is it okay at work but not at home? It's okay at home but not at work. Friendships, you haven't got any friends, got too many friends pulling on your time. Hobbies, you're not doing anything, you're not getting any fun, any free time, you're not getting enough rest. Rest is important. Um, you're you've got plans but they don't work out. You've got a mindset that says every time something goes good, you wait for the shoe to drop and it's all going to go bad. So there's all those different facets of ourselves, and that's why we get overwhelmed and we go, oh my God, I don't know where to start. And that's sometimes what puts us off going to talk to someone. But actually through talking, through hearing our voice and having that mirrored back in some way, does help. But the mirroring process is just the beginning. It's really about us being able to make choices that work for ourselves so that we can take the first step. And if you're taking steps already, that is massively moving you further forward. Um, so, like I said, there's no one size that fits all, but there are truths, and I've seen these play out time and time again. If I look at, from I'd worked with 300 people when I originally had done my training. When I worked in schools, on average, I was working 3 days a week, 8 appointments a day. So you add that over the course of 4 years in one school and 16 years in one service, I've come into contact with a lot of people. And in my service, over 8 years, when I was running that service, we had on average 600, 800 referrals a year. And most of those I was assessing with my staff because we do the assessments together. We come up with a hypothesis, share that with the client, and try and get them moving forward in the best way possible that work for them. So I've worked with thousands of people. So I've seen things play out time and time again with repetition, regulation, identity shifts, power dynamics, power of daily practice. So in this episode, I'm going to share those with you, plus real stories, a transformation that might just mirror your own. So, why is this important to me? So I'm going to put some timestamps on this because I maybe do videos much longer than the average person on here. I'm not sure. So I didn't come to any of my understandings initially, like I said, through the traditional route. Quite the opposite. My school years were filled with disconnection and boredom. I couldn't connect with the system. I couldn't connect with the information they were sharing with me. So by 14 years old, I'm drawing blanks. I don't understand what they're telling me. Later on, 10, 20 years later, when I started studying as a therapist, I saw how much that had made it difficult for me to do the basics of writing essays. I could read books, I read loads. Um, excuse me. And when I came on to do my master's, but I was really good at subjects like geography and music. So I was very musical. And I've since learned about the different intelligences we have. So I clearly had a people intelligence and musical intelligence, but um, doing things, other subjects, especially when the teacher was boring and the system was boring. So that was my experience. So I sort of drifted out. And I never thought about education after that. I got a job at 16 and worked in hotel and catering for over 5 years and travelled around, staying at different places and spaces and meeting people from all different backgrounds, which was brilliant. When you live in an area where it's surfing, everyone lives by the sea. I've worked in the countryside. I've worked in cities. I've worked, all over. So at that point in time, and I was talking to a client about this the other day, it's just about doing a job to pay the bills. Sometimes when you're 18, 19, 20, you don't necessarily want to go to university, but you can feel like you're lost in the system because everyone else is going to university and you think you should, but actually you just want a job, pay the bills, to support your love of travel, party and meeting new people. And sometimes the route that people take, and then they find their feet a few years later, a job, maybe they do a few jobs and then they start to find their feet. So the usual way that we channel information on young people is what I know causes a lot of distress unnecessarily and even mental health issues in some cases. So that was where I was at. That's what motivated me until I came to back to the UK and into London and met my partner and started having children and didn't want to carry on working in hotels doing split shifts. The rhythm for that wasn't sustainable. And then my curiosity said, what would it be like if I did some what did I want to do next? Yeah, an office job. So the curiosity was just, I'd like to do an office job. I'd like to do 9 to 5, work Monday to Friday, not the crazy shifts, 6 days a week, all over 365 days of the year. So that's what I did. I did an office job for a couple of years, really loved it, worked for an international courier company and was dealing with complaints every day. People's parcels were going missing. And so I was on the other end of the phone trying to find out why your food hadn't arrived or your cakes to your aunt in whatever country hadn't arrived. So after a bit, then there was another turning point, another curiosity 2 years later, and I started volunteering for the Samaritans. And that was the massive turning point. I thought, I enjoy this. I was helping people. It was the hard end of life, though. People were in really bad ways that were calling up Samaritans. And it's been one of the best telephone lines ever out there, I think. And it's still there. And it does a lot of amazing work. And it's manned by volunteers. And the Samaritans is funded, I think, through a lot of people who really value the work that they do. So the supervisors noticed something in me that I had a gift for helping others in emotional distress and helping them through those challenges. So that was the spark that led me to do the therapy training. But because I didn't really go through school, I wasn't sure of my academic ability. I didn't really have any confidence. And at first, the course was 6 weeks. It just focused on the process of reflection, not answers, not tests, and not essays. And so that was perfect for my experiential learning style. So that's the kinesthetic learning style. If we're going to use the academic language, we have visual learning, auditory learning, kinesthetic learning, and lots of the boys that I worked with in schools that were struggling, that were called ADHD, a proportion of those were kinesthetic learners and were the ones that would have done great in routes that had them doing hands-on work, whether that was mechanics, painting, farm machinery, engineering, technical stuff like that. Anyway, so I did that course, met an amazing trainer and signed up for the year. So I didn't sign up for the 4 years. Diplomas are mostly 4 years. signed up for the year and really just got into the whole. I started reading about world religion and psychology and philosophy, and the different, as I got into the second year, we started to cover the theories, person-centered, cognitive behavioral, psychoanalytic, existential theory, which is like meaning, death, existence. A whole range of different therapeutic models, basically. And then in the third year, start working with people. And despite all that, though, despite learning all these theories, despite getting that understanding, I was in and out of these cycles. I wouldn't say I was depressed as a teenager, more of a sort of melancholic malaise. It's not a term we use that much, but I often refer to Lowry's picture that he painted, the artist in the north, of the skylines of the factories and the grey skies, and there was a sort of melancholy. And I think a lot of people from the north can really resonate with this sense of our parents. There was a sense of melancholy and working hard, and really needing that Friday night to go and have a drink and chat with your mates and defrag. And so I had this sort of undertone, this underline, and that definitely came out after I had my first child and then my second child. And so I struggled with basic motivation, with mood, and yet something had been awakened. I really enjoyed the study and read loads. I was always a prolific reader, whatever it was that I started to read. And there was a part of me, especially after my first child, though I don't want to feel like that forever. And I was scared that I might feel like that because my mum had depression on and off, and we were being told that it runs in families, and I don't believe that is the case. We can learn states, not just doesn't mean say it's part of our DNA, but until we start examining everyone's, chromosomes and DNA and brain research on all of us, we won't necessarily know what's exactly true. But there was a part of me that just thought, I don't have to feel like this forever. I don't want to. So what can I do to change that? And that was before I actually got into the training, when I started trying things like I used aromatherapy, I did aerobics, I'd go for walks, I had a baby in a pushchair, do a lot of walking. And it was when I started to sort of try the things that I could access at that time. And even though I was coming into contact with health professionals, no one was giving me any tips as to how I shifted out of these states. Therapy had just started to become a thing, and doctors had started to employ therapists. And so I spoke to the midwife, and I had therapy around after my first child, but accessing it wasn't easy. I'd had it a second time when my son was diagnosed as diabetic, and it was a complete shock. And I got some support to work through how that affected us all as a family and trying to manage, having a child who was, I think he was 4 at the time, and you're having to inject. And we didn't have the Dexcom arm things then. We had to do the finger pricking all the time and injecting a child. And, it was really difficult. I found that really difficult as a parent. So I started becoming obsessed, and I've realized over the years I actually do have an obsessive trait. And obsession can be good in some ways. If you've got good focus, you can really focus. Not just what gets people stuck, but what shifts us out of it. And I thought about all these people that come from really difficult backgrounds, as we talk about in local authorities, adverse childhood experiences, trauma, all these difficult backgrounds. But how do some of us get out of that? How do some of us come out of those circumstances and make it and become successful? And that really depends on what that means for you. So it led me to explore all these different things. And so early on, it was these psychology models about the mind and distress and depression and anxiety. And then later on, when I started working in schools, I knew that that wasn't enough. So I did a lot of work with Mindfulness in London, and they do work on mental health, specifically on the mental health continuum, which was a model that I preferred way over the model that is used in psychiatry and clinical services, which is the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Health. I preferred the mental health continuum because we're all on that continuum. It's not they've got mental health and they haven't. We're all on this continuum of okay, doing great, doing okay, not so okay, stress, red alert, crises. There's a continuum. And so they looked at what the kind of key things that help people come out of crises, out of overwhelm, back into a place of homeostasis. And some of us don't stay that long in that, and we go back into stress. But over time, with the tools and with implementing that, then we can stay in states of optimal health longer. So I started trying out these things for myself. And I can't remember when I started writing my own 30-day challenges, actually. And I started sort of challenging my own habits and beliefs and pushing myself past my comfort zone, which I massively did in the therapy training. So the question was it possible to be truly happy, fulfilled, and like myself? Well, I didn't really know what like myself was because I had this sort of melancholic malaise that had lingered for a while. And my sense of self hadn't really fully formed, and that's a bit deep, but a bit Jungian in a way. And I had these mindsets that I'd um, soaked in, as we do, growing up without realizing it, from my mum and the way that she viewed the world. Life is hard, life is difficult, people are like this, da 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 da. And she gave me some great mindsets, but she also gave me some ones that were quite difficult to apply in modern life, because these belief systems can interfere with enjoying work, with doing good work, and pursuing things that you like, especially when you come from the working class background of the 60s and 50s. So, and then why do you sabotage? We can start to experience some good times, and our mental mind or our ego can come in and sabotage that and take us back to old mood and patterns. So this is the thing on the cycle. You can start to come out of this malaise, this melancholy, this anxiety, and you start to come out of that, you start to feel lighter and happier and have some fun time with your friends. But there'll be something, maybe your mind or your ego, it's like, this is a bit unfamiliar. Let's take you back to what we know, regardless of who you are and what you know works for you. So then we started learning about brain research, and Andrew Huberman and others have done loads of brain research and started looking at the chemicals involved in us feeling good. And this is where this whole concept of pharmaceuticals came from, that we have to sort out these chemicals in the brain. And if only it was that simple. And that's not true. But we do have dopamine and serotonin and endorphins that release. Do we all have it in the same amounts? And some people who get anxiety may have an overload of certain anxiety chemicals in the body, but it's deep and it's complex. So, but we know that we can rewire the brain, create these new neural pathways, and there are skills to doing that. So if anything you're going to get out of this video is whatever choice you make, practice it for at least 7 days or possibly 30. So if you think, I want to get stronger, you're not going to go in the gym once and lift up weights once. You're going to go either every day and do arms one day, legs one day, or 3 times a week. Or if you want to improve your well-being and go walking, you can do 10 minutes every day. Or you want to reduce your risk of getting diabetes and you're pre-diabetic, you go walking after you eat, but you do it every day. And after a week, you kind of assess, how has that gone for me? And then after 2 weeks, you go, do I feel more fitter and more toned because I'm going in the gym, and fitter because I'm swimming, and fitter because I'm more ability to walk and talk while I'm walking faster. So you use your own improvement as your gauge to decide whether that's working for you or not. And that's why it's important. Repetition, building up momentum, and making a commitment to yourself, regardless of who else tries to convince you to do something else on a Thursday, when Thursday is your day for going to the gym. And that's where we have to start really thinking about where we give our power and time away, and where we should actually start sticking to the things that are important. So the psychology of behavior change and all of that is not just about willpower. And what science says about how we need to regulate the nervous system for healing and transformation has become much more widespread now. And there's so much truth in that. And chemicals like dopamine, oxytocin, endorphins, serotonin influence your mood, your habits, and relationships. So I've noticed when I'm working with women, more so in the last few years, actually, they become aware of how their moods and states do change through the different cycles that they've got. But it's not that we didn't know that, but now people are tracking their cycles more and they're apt to do that. And they're starting to be able to go, okay, there is a direct correlation, or no, there isn't, or there's a little bit, but that isn't only it. Is it that I'm also needing to drink more water and I'm eating bread and bread's not good for me, and then starting to examine that in more detail, and it can really work when you start to track, in particular for a woman, you start to track your cycle. And then why flow states and novelty, like when I was on my Wales trip, if you've been looking at my camper van videos, are really good for releasing dopamine. And it's a different way of getting dopamine, and several bouts of dopamine can help you decide whether you really love that. You don't need motivation. You just go, I really enjoyed doing that. I think I'll do that again. Or no, I don't know. It's all right. I did it once, not going to do it again. And that's how I kind of experimentally approach things. So understanding your energy, your cycles, what keeps you stuck, can finally start building momentum. And one of the key things to do is actually stop saying that I'm stuck. I'm stuck. I'm stuck. What you're telling the universe, you're stuck. Language is really powerful, and the words that we use are really powerful. And if words carried energy, as they believe in numerology, letters carry particular energy signatures. We're using those words. So it's better to start saying, okay, I don't know where I'm at the moment, but I know things are improving, or things will turn around, or I'm starting to feel more focused and have clarity. So you need to start saying what you want, not where you think you're at, because stuckness isn't always stuck. Sometimes we need to pause. Like when you're doing research and you're in the field, you're taking all this data, you read these books, you have all these interviews with people, you take this data, you chat, 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 chat. It's going into the brain, but it's not going to come out and be churned out same day. Often we need a few days of gestation, and then we go, okay, I'm ready to type that now. So we need to start trusting our bodies and what it naturally does, and how we're sometimes fighting against those cycles. When lots of people say, oh, I've got a creative block, not necessarily. It's that you're thinking that you should write at the time when you actually, your body's asking you to do something else. So it's about starting to really understand yourself and honoring where you're at and your body. So there's lots of practical tools out there that we can use, and we can get really overwhelmed by, do I do that, do that? So what I do is really practically help people look at, when they come and see me, what's going on, how long's it been going on for, what would you really like to shift? And then what are the facets of your life that are going okay, because we can't look at everything at the same time? And what one thing or two things or three things could you do right now that will make a difference? So if you're in crises, as I talked about the continuum, if you're in crises, you have to bring your crisis down. Your brain can't function and make decisions when you're in crisis, so you have to learn to do deep breathing. And those box breathing, you can look it up online. Deep cycles of breathing. You need at least 3 breaths, I think, unless you've been in a chronic state of anxiety and panic for a long time. You need to start learning what it feels like when your body is relaxed. So doing flow breath, ujjayi breath, something that is like slow melodic, every night before you go to bed, or while you lay on the bed, or every morning as you sit in your office chair, like what I am now. You just lean back and start focusing on your breath. We need to teach the nervous system to calm down, especially, and this took me longer than necessarily to learn, was that as you start hitting burnout, if you don't do that, your body's not getting any chance to heal and to go into relax. You're just living on that adrenaline. And then it's about being able to get into, learn how to shift states more effortlessly, creating a plan, what's in your plan, learning how to audit that. And it sounds like a lot, but I can actually help you simplify that, so that you can have an A4 sheet or the back of your diary that says, right, this is what I'm doing every day. This is what I'm committing to and sign up to. And then doing that. And then you can build on that. So one step is better than no steps. And then how you build up your own emotional resilience and trust. And like I said, why repetition and momentum matters. So, like I said, I've been through those spirals. I had burnout in 2000 for a whole year. It was horrible. And it was an accumulation of just the amount of challenges and stuff we faced as a family, that finally I just sort of was able to pause. And it was the end of a 4-year diploma, and I was literally blood, sweat, and tears. For the first year, the typewriter, I didn't even have my mate, bless her, who's been an angel in my life many times, gave me a computer in my, I think it was second year, so I could start typing on the laptops. I could go to the college and use their facilities. No one had ever shown me how to use PC, so I lost a lot of work as well. I didn't know about saving it. Very simple things that now we take for granted, but at that time was incredibly difficult to use. So there was just, so many things going on. My youngest son had been hospitalized 3 times with serious illnesses before he was 3. My other son was diagnosed diabetic when he was 4, and it was constant hospital rounds, and there were other things going on in the family. And then I was doing this from when my youngest son was 2, started this academic work. So by the end of 99, 2000, I was spent. I was literally spent. I spent the year literally just taking the kids to school, back, cooking them dinner, doing the basics, and sleeping. I slept loads. I must have slept, let me think, 14 hours a day at least. I'm talking about from 9 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning, and then in the afternoon, like every day. Anyway, thank goodness that is not my life now. And that's why I just have a lot of compassion and empathy for people who've got what we know now, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and burnout. Because once you hit that place, it's awful. So that's why I'm really keen on saying, are you moving in that direction? What can we do to turn back and not have, this mental, physical, psychological crash and not go into these spirals? So there's been other points in time in life, like when I had my car accident, where I actually experienced PTSD. That then also, and I've talked about that on other videos. Then I had to sort of get over that, but it was weird in a way, because that car accident brought up every other sort of trauma I'd experienced, like a washing line, into my awareness. So the car accident was horrendous, but at the same time, I cleared within that 3 or 4 months just so much of those early things that have impacted me. And we learn about all this when we're therapists, but I share a lot of this stuff with therapists. Aren't immune to life and relationships and being in jobs that suck. So so that's the key aspect of, how you need to start thinking about if you feel like you're stuck and you're um in this place that just um feels ick. I've mentioned, I'll just reflect, I've mentioned several tools there that if you apply them and create a plan, a 30-day plan, whatever month you're in, and don't say, I'll start tomorrow, I'll start next week. Start today with one thing, even if that is practicing mindfulness for 3 minutes. And what that means is you sit in the chair and you take some deep breaths, and you just, if I was doing it now, I'd be thinking things like, how does my body feel as I sit in this chair? And I'm aware of my body a lot because after my car accident, I felt like a very big, heavy bag of potatoes. I was always aware of this heaviness, this dragging, this trying to get my muscle switched on. So how do I feel in the body right now? How do you feel in the body? Are you heavy or are you light? Can you feel the air? I've got the air coming through the window. Can you feel the hair on the top of your head or on the back of your neck? Can you feel the space between your shoulder blades? And as you take a deep breath, can you take that deep breath down to your feet? Can you imagine that at the bottom of your feet is a beautiful colour coming out the bottom of your feet into the ground? And you're grounding, second tip, grounding. So you take a deep breath and you now through 3 deep flow breaths. breathing. Okay, mindfulness, grounding, breathing. 3 things you can do right now. Then, if you can have a pause in moments during the day with work, especially if you get overwhelmed, if you keep typing when you're already stressed and you're doing this, I want you to lean back and do what I've just shown. Okay, just do that. And if your brain is saying, no, I need to get this done, actually getting more stress never helps report writing. Believe me, I wrote loads of reports. So you need to be able to sit back, and it's the practice of sitting back and taking a moment starts to give your mind and body a message of taking a break. She or he is taking a break. Okay. Then it's, have you had enough water? Because we get headaches when we haven't had enough water. So nutrition. Are you taking any supplements? And I'm not a medic, so do get some advice if you need it about your health and mental health. But there are certain nutritions that we just are low on that affect the balance in our body. So nutrition. And so you can think like that, and you might think, okay, I know I really need to do more walking. After dinner tonight, 10 minutes, put your shoes on, go for a walk. Tell yourself, I'm just doing it. Not I think I'll do it. Trying isn't doing. Okay, so you just go for a walk. Okay, so sign up to yourself today. And that's 4 tips. The other one is state shift. Now, some people, I need a whole workshop to teach them state management because we've got to work on the brain, the physiology, get people in tune. But theoretically, you can practice state shift by just, if you sat back and imagined the last trip that you went on that was there was something on that trip that was amazing. Have you went in a cathedral, was stood on the beach, feeling the wind on your face? Something that just gave you that real deep sense of peace and felt amazing. So allow yourself to feel that, see that, hear that. So where was I? I was on Freshwater West. I can feel the wind on my face. It was quite windy for days. And I could see the waves crashing, and it's that rawness, that energy of nature. And I can hear the shh coming through. I heard that for days afterwards when I come back off the trek. And that's coming through. And there's a real peace in the area there. Everyone's just really peaceful, a real sense of peace, and the sun's shining, and it's like 25 degrees, and I can feel it beating down on the back of my neck. But I've got a bottle of ice cold water, and that just, oh, it just feels so good when you drink that and you feel the ice water going down into your stomach. So this is a mind, body, auditory, visual, kinesthetic, sensory process to connect with. Teach it in NLP. So you get that and you do that. And now, what have you had for breakfast? Did you have cereal? Did you have eggs on toast? You know, or do you need to put petrol in the car? So now I've taken you out of that state. Okay. Now we're going to go into what thing irritated you, activated some annoyance, got you stressed. A lot of people deal with irritation. They don't realize that irritation is the passage to sort of burnout. So we need to the body's already telling us we need to have some rest and some time out. So so the path, okay, we don't want to remain on that path, but in this moment we're activating, purposely triggering that feeling. So you're getting that. Okay, so I'll recall an email I had. Some emails stick out. God, I'm going back about a decade. I remember reading it, get really irritated. Therapists get mad, therapists get irritated. Okay. And oh, you know, it's like you want to email it. So connect with that feeling, connect with what you're seeing. It might not be an email. It might be that somebody didn't feed the dog. The petrol station didn't have petrol. You've got to go somewhere else. Whatever it was, traffic is a common one. Get into that state, see what you're seeing, hear what you're hearing. Feel what you're feeling. So now we're using the senses again. Well, we easily slip into those. That's almost like a default method for most people. Some people's default methods or strategies, ways of being, is naturally happy and joyous, but not everyone's is. A lot of it is not that. So you've got that. Go back to, okay, what did you have for breakfast yesterday? What have you got on this afternoon? Okay. Take a deep breath. Bring yourself back to center. Go back into mindfulness, breathing and grounding. So what can you feel? Your body's on the chair, on the sofa, you lay on the floor, the air on your face. Tune into the sound. Traffic, the fridge humming. Doesn't that annoy you at night? Anyway, neutral. Breathe in. Take your energy down to your feet. Now, that memory over here, maybe it's over there for you or up there. That memory, go back into that memory of where you went. It was great. There were people there, you were laughing, or you was on your own. You just felt the waves. You smelt the trees. It just rained. Whatever that memory is, go back into that. Go back into what you were seeing, what you were hearing, what you were feeling. If you start practicing this is shifting states. This is state management, this is shifting states. And we purposely, when we want to do a presentation or we purposely tap into that at times. We get ourselves into the state we want. Athletes do it all the time. And eventually we'll get into a flow state. And a flow state's where we're just not thinking that hard about it. We just end up flowing. We're writing something, we're painting, and we go into this flow state. And we're not always going to be in that state, because sometimes actually those jolts and those triggers are what makes us take action. And I know some of my best blogs and things that I've recorded have been because I've read something and thought, no, I don't agree with that. Or actually, this is what I think. This is my take on it. So we've got mindfulness, breathing, grounding, state management that you can do right now to pull yourself out of this. While you're focusing on that, you're focusing on what's possible, you're focusing on what you can do, and your focus is on maybe you're just starting to feel some nice feelings. So enjoy those, start to milk those feelings. Oh, I feel calm, I feel flow, I feel, ooh, I think I'll put some nice music on. I think I'll go for a walk. So now do something in connection with those feelings if you can. If you can take 5 minutes, 10 minutes away from the laptop, or whatever it is that you do, go and make a coffee. Do mindfulness around the kettle. Listen to it boiling. Listen to the sound of the coffee granules going in the cup. So what this does, it just slows things right down, slows down this whole feeling of time. Now we're not rushing. Now we get our state in a place of, now the idea is, okay, I know this is what I'll write in the report. I'm going to go to yoga tonight. I think when the kids come back tonight, maybe I'll make some cakes for them. And so now your body, your higher self, your spirit, whoever, starts coming up with some ideas. Okay. Now your mind might counteract that and go, no, that's silly, don't do that. Try and avoid that. Go like that mentally with your hand and stay with that and pursue it and start testing this out. So this is a sort of quick nudge into how we can get stuck, get caught in mind loops, things like that. And I haven't really gone into the mind loops. I've done a whole one of the episodes I did for the 30-day program. I think it's toxic relationships and mind loops that I did, but I'll just basically go over that, and then I'll basically go over the chemicals, okay, that are involved in this. So when I say mind loops, it's the kind of thing that goes around and around your head. So, you know, like if you're at work and somebody says something, and for some reason it matters to you, and it'll keep going around your brain. Why did they say that? Why did that? Or your boss has done something and you're irritated, and it stays with you and it keeps repeating around your head. Or you're going through some kind of drama with your partner. And in toxic relationships, this is really common, because part of the strategy of the narcissist or the toxic partner is to get you confused and get you in mind loops. And that's why you really need to be aware of this stuff. So you've got to learn how to be aware of them, what's happening, challenge them, and then stop. And the easiest way, in a sense, to stop the mind loop, and it's really hard for people who say have broke up out of a relationship, is to refocus on something else as much as possible. And it's not about ignoring what you feel, spiritually bypassing any of that, but we want to unhook. Now, another way that I did it over 30 days, because I've had them over different things, like I say, we can have obsessive traits. And is I did the Mula mantra, which is because I practice yoga. It's where you say the same repetitious mantra over and over again. But the Mula mantra has like 3 verses, and I did that every morning for 30 days. Took about 20 minutes because I recited it 103 times, which is, I think it's 103, where you have all 108, the mala beats that go around and what you see Buddhists do. And that massively got me out of some of the mind loops that I was struggling with then. So if you want to know more, tune in, listen to the other podcasts that I'm doing, because I'm going to do more of these type of tips and stuff that I do that I sometimes write about in a blog and upload to my website. But like and subscribe to my page, because even though I do the campervan travels, I'm going to do a separate YouTube site for that. But I am going to be looking more at understanding things like brain chemistry, motivation, you know, how we move from extrinsic to intrinsic, things like that. And the reason I cover some of these things is because it's come up time and time again in my work. Clients go, I've got no motivation. No, don't wait for motivation. Just choose. Just do it. Tip number 5, just choose. Okay. Learning what works for you. So at the end of the week, the main tip, the overall, is at the end of the week, you go, I practice what Mel said, these 5 things, chooses one of them. Every day, I set my timer every hour, and I felt into what I was feeling, and this is what I noticed happened. So if you notice that you're feeling calmer and better and in a better state, managing your work better, and time feels like it's expanding, and you're feeling more flow and generous and happier and in your relationships, and you've not had to do that much, isn't it worth practicing that? Isn't it worth signing yourself up to your own program? I make these programs all the time. I'm not saying what's right for people, but I help people design a program that's going to work for them. So hopefully you found this educational, inspiring, uplifting, and gives you some idea of who I am and how I work. Thank you for watching, and like and subscribe. Contact me on the link below if you want to book an intro session, which is a couple of hours where you want to book a series of sessions with me.